Hi Booklovers, welcome back to my channel. I am back with another late wrap-up. This is a wrap-up for all the books that I read back in March. I'm not sure how I did it again, but I read another 40-something books last month, which is partly the reason why I've been putting off filming this video, because I know it's gonna be another really long one. So let's just jump into all the books that I read back in March. The first book that I read was Like You Love Me by Adriana Locke. This is the first book in her new series, a new small town romance series. I thought this one was okay. I give it 3 stars. I really was hoping to love it. It's friends to lovers, childhood best friends to lovers. It's got a freaking marriage of convenience. Sophie, the heroine, needs to save her bed and breakfast, and the hero, Holden, needs to prove to his boss that he is a family man. So it's a modern day marriage of convenience, but I kind of struggled with this one. Like, it was a very okay read. I felt a little disconnected from the story and the characters. I never really fell in love with this romance or with a small town, which is why it's only like an average 3 stars for me. There were still some pretty cute moments, but overall this one I definitely didn't love it as much as I was hoping to love it. And then I dove back into some mafia romances. I finished up the last 2 books in the Hitman series by Jessica Clare and Jen Frederick. Last Kiss was book 3. I gave this one 3 stars. I sadly didn't love it as much as book 1. Book 1 was easily the best one for me in the series, but it was still okay. It was still a fairly fun mafia romance. These books aren't really all that dark, but Last Kiss is about Naomi and Vasily. Naomi is the sister of the hero from book 2. She was captured, which is why her brother was trying to find her, but then right when she's about to get her freedom, she's captured by another guy, a Russian guy. Because Naomi is a genius with computers, Vasily needs her help with tracking down this painting. He needs this painting because it's his ticket to becoming the new leader of the Russian mob. Like the first 2 books, this one had some suspense, some action. We have a hero who's torn between his duty and then falling in love with a heroine. Naomi is autistic. She is an intense germaphobe. But yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. I didn't love it, didn't hate it. I did like the whole treasure hunting part, treasure hunting for the painting. I like this idea of a hacker heroine and a cold-hearted mafia guy who have to work together and do all this cool stuff, but it didn't work out quite as well as I was hoping it would. And then book 4, Last Hope, I also gave 3 stars. It was just a very average read. We have another hitman hero in Mendoza, and he meets the heroine when she's trying to find her missing best friend. Ava's best friend is kidnapped, so she tries to go into the underworld to find her. Unfortunately, this leads to her getting into a plane crash and getting saved by the hero. So these 2 are stuck in a jungle trying to survive. It's a pretty wild read. There's a lot of action as the hero is trying to steal some top secret information from his assignment, and of course they start falling in lust with each other while they're hiding in the jungle. Also, the hero is a virgin, he's got a monster dick, and by this point I was just like, okay, fine, why not? I do appreciate that the series doesn't really take itself too seriously. It is pretty light when it comes to like a dark mafia romance. There is still some violence and suspense, but nothing too intense. But this 4th book was just an okay ending for this mafia romance series. And then I read Make It Sweet by Kristen Callahan, which was one of my favorite reads from last month. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I loved it. It's a foodie romance, and I love foodie romances. We've got a grumpy hero. Lucian is an ex-hockey player. Now he just works at his grandmother's estate, working as the chef, as a pastry chef. The heroine, Emma, is an actress. She's just been fired from her Game of Thrones like fantasy series. She played the main character like Daenerys, but she got killed off, so she doesn't really know what to do next. She decides to go on a little retreat at the same estate where Lucian is. The romance is so sweet, but it does get off to a rough start because Lucian just doesn't want to interact with anybody or get close to anybody. He feels insanely lost from not being able to play hockey anymore, which was his whole life. But Emma worms her way into Lucian, into his heart, and he can't stop baking for her. He can't stop feeding her, which I loved so much. There's lots of good longing. There's a ton of good pastries, which I honestly only knew because I watched the Great British Bake Off, but I loved it. It was like a sports adjacent kind of romance. If you love a grumpy hero, if you love one who loves to feed his heroine, you need to read Make It Sweet. Next I read Engagement and Espionage by Reid. This is the first book in Cletus and Jen series. Their romance was Beard Science, book 3 in the Winston Brothers series, and Reid decided to give themselves their own series. Cletus is easily the most interesting Winston brother, and I was really happy to be back with him and back in this little small town. Even though Cletus and Jen got their happily ever after in Beard Science, we do get to see what happens after that. They're currently engaged and are trying to plan their wedding, but things just keep going out of hand and they're too busy to sit down and plan this wedding. There's a whole mystery with someone trying to sabotage Jen and her bakery. I gave this one 4 stars. You definitely need to read Beard Science first before you start this new series, but I am excited for more of Cletus and Jen. Next I read The Boyfriend Project by Farrah Rochon. This one I sadly was not a fan of. I gave it 2 stars. I really struggled with this one, unfortunately. I just did not get into the romance at all. The setup of this book reminded me a lot of this one Lauren Lane series where the heroine finds out that her boyfriend was cheating on her and then she becomes best friends with those girls. I did love the friendship group. That was definitely the best part about this book for me and the only part that I was really invested in, though I do wish that we got a little bit more from the friendship, but the romance was just really underwhelming and boring and slow. I don't think there were even that many interactions between the main characters, especially in the beginning, but it is an office romance. Daniel is a new employee at Samaya's workplace. They work in the tech industry and Samaya is actually developing her own app, so I did really appreciate this aspect about Samaya, but the romance, I was not feeling the chemistry. I was feeling really bored, and then the ending comes and it wraps up way too neatly and quickly. So even though this one wasn't for me, I still do want to continue with the series because it's about the whole friendship group, and that was the only thing that I really cared about. And then I read 2 Meghan Quinn books, mainly because my library has been acquiring a lot of her audiobooks. Sadly though, these were both 3-star reads. I have definitely read better from her. The first one that I read was The Modern Gentleman. This one is kind of like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Wes, the hero, is an advice columnist and he is tasked with writing about love and relationships, but all the advice that he had before he met June, the heroine, is not working on her, so he needs a better play. The book actually starts off with Wes having lost the heroine, lost June, and is wallowing over trying to get her back, and then the book continues on with how they first met and fell in love and then broke apart. I mean, you can kind of guess how things turn sour between them. Wes is tasked with writing about his relationship with June, doing this whole experiment without her knowing. It's a pretty straightforward read. You pretty much guess exactly what happens, although I do appreciate the whole groveling from Wes. So this one is okay, 3 stars. And then the other Meghan Quinn book that I read was Boss Man Bridegroom, which I also gave 3 stars. Fun, but nothing all that memorable. This one's got a boss assistant romance, so office romance, and it's also got a fake engagement. Wrath, the hero, needs a new assistant, and Charlie is the only one who is capable of standing up to him, so he hires her. And then somehow things lead to them trying to fulfill Charlie's grandmother's dying wish to see Charlie married. It's cute, it's fun, which is pretty typical from Meghan Quinn. I just felt like things were a little bit too surface level for me. I definitely wanted more depth to the characters and to their romance, but still, if you love Meghan Quinn, this one is pretty standard from her. Next I read Ante Up by Christina C. Jones. This one I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I love that this one is set in Vegas. The heroine is a card shark. The hero comes from a wealthy family who owns a bunch of casinos and hotels. Asha and King have insane chemistry from the moment that they meet. They end up in a one-night stand with Asha not knowing who King is. It's a really steamy romance and it even turns into a bit of romantic suspense as well. Asha's brother owes a huge debt to her ex, who is not the greatest guy. My main complaint though was mainly just the ending. I just didn't feel like Asha and King were as solid as they could have been. It was more a happy for now than a happily ever after. And the next book in the series isn't even about them, so we don't get to see more of them solidify their relationship. But still, this was a really exciting story. I love the whole setting of the Vegas underworld. And then I read a ton of Julia Quinn books because I ended up reading every single book in her backlist for a video, which you can go watch if you haven't. I finished up the last of her backlist back in March. I read 2 series. I read a ton of her novellas in her anthologies. This series is her Linden Sister series. It's a duet, 2 books, 2 sisters. Book 1 is Everything in the Moon, which is a second chance romance. Our 2 main characters come from different social classes. Robert is an earl, Victoria is the daughter of a vicar. They were supposed to get married and run away years ago, but then things didn't turn out the way they hoped. They were torn apart and haven't seen each other in a very long time. This one was so good, angsty as Julia Quinn can get. I give it 4 stars. I'm a sucker for second chance romance, but it is still fairly lighthearted because it is Julia Quinn. Robert is our broken-hearted hero who thinks he wants revenge against Victoria, but deep down he knows he never stopped loving her. The romance is really sweet, and I always love that realization, especially from the hero when he realizes that things weren't quite exactly how they seemed and how he thought back then. And then book 2, Brighter Than the Sun, is about the younger Linden sister. Ellie is a heroine who speaks her mind. She deals in stocks, makes money for herself, and is trying to get independence from her father and future stepmother. She finds that independence through a marriage of convenience with her hero Charles, who literally falls at her feet during their adorable meet cute. He is ridiculously drunk, which is why he falls out of a tree, but they do make a deal, get married, and try to make the most of their marriage. I also gave this one 4 stars. It was adorable. I loved these 2 characters and seeing them trying to navigate this whole marriage. The series was just really great. I also read the Agents of the Crown series, which is another duet. The heroes are, of course, Agents of the Crown. Book 1, To Catch an Heiress, I did not like. I gave it 2 stars. I was so annoyed at our main characters. It's kind of enemies to lovers and they just could not stop bickering like children. I did really love the setup of this one though. The heroine is trying to run away from her uncle, her guardian. Caroline ends up kidnapped by the hero Blake because Blake thinks that she is some spy working with that guardian. So she's his captive and she doesn't make things easy for Blake, which is why they never stop bickering and arguing. I got really tired of these 2, so I just wasn't a fan of this one. Book 2 though, How to Marry Marquis, I loved so much more. I give this one 4, almost 4.5 stars. It's not quite as suspenseful or actiony as book 1 was, but I still loved it. Elizabeth, the heroine, and her siblings are orphans. She and her family need money desperately, and the only way to get that fast is to marry someone. James, our hero, is a marquis and he has a ton of money, so it would be a perfect setup, except that James pretends to be something else. He pretends to be his aunt's estate manager, which means that Elizabeth believes that he doesn't have money, so even though she's falling for him, she believes that she can't marry him. I love these 2. They were so freaking adorable together, lots of longing. Elizabeth's family, her siblings, were hilarious as well. Lots of good comic relief from them. I had a lot of fun with this one and I enjoyed it so much more than the first book. I also read Bridgerton's Happily Ever After, which is the collection of the second epilogues from each of the 8 books. This collection was great. I give it 4 stars. It's perfect if you love the Bridgerton series. My favorite of the second epilogue, surprisingly though, was Michael and Francesca's. And then a couple anthologies that I read from Julia Quinn. I read the novella in Where's My Hero, which I gave 3 stars. This one, the hero falls for his fiance's sister. The Lady Most Likely, which I gave 4 stars to. That novella was really sweet with a shy heroine. The Lady Most Willing, that one I gave 3 stars to. That whole anthology has heroines who are all kidnapped to the Scottish castle. The Further Observations of Lady Whistledown, I gave 4 stars to. The heroine was jilted by a guy she thought was gonna marry, but then she ends up falling for his older earl brother. Lady Whistledown Strikes Back, I gave that novella 4 stars. This one was adorable. It's got a hero who is a fortune hunter. He needs money. He needs someone to marry to find money. He ends up falling for his late friend's sister who does have money, but he loves her too much to take advantage of that. And then the last Julia Quinn novella was in 4 Weddings and a Sixpence. This one I gave 3 stars to. The whole premise of the anthology is this group of friends, this group of girlfriends, they use this lucky sixpence to find love. Once I finished up every single Julia Quinn book, I read a Sonali Dev book. This is Recipe for Persuasion, which is book 2 in the Raja series. This is a retelling of Persuasion by Jane Austen, which is on par for me with Pride and Prejudice. I love them both so much. Sadly, I didn't love this one. I gave this one 3 stars like I gave the first book in the series. I wanted this book to focus more on the romance, on the second chance romance. Ashna, the heroine, is a chef. Rico, the hero, is a famous soccer player. They reunite when they're paired together for this this reality cooking TV show. I wanted the book to focus more on them, on their second chance romance, because I feel like the book doesn't really dive too deep into their second chance romance. It focused a lot on Ashna and her twisted relationship with her father and the restaurant that he owned that now she owns. And there's also another whole storyline with Ashna's mother and how she was forced to marry Ashna's father instead of being with the man that she loved. So there's a lot going on besides the romance, which is why I struggled with this one a lot. But I did love the whole foodie aspect of it. The heroine is a chef and she teaches Rico how to cook on the TV show. But romance-wise, I wanted more from this. Next up, a new adult high school romance, Close to Me by Monica Murphy. I don't usually read books set in high school anymore, but this one is new adults, like mature YA, and I have read and loved Monica Murphy before, which is why I read this. It's the first book in the Callahan series, which is a spin-off of the One Week Girlfriend series, which I have read a few books of. The main characters, the siblings of this series, are actually Drew and Fable's kids. So if you love them in One Week Girlfriend, you can read about their second generation in the series. Close to Me is a good girl, bad boy kind of romance. She comes from a good family, he comes from the wrong side of the tracks. They meet in high school, they're total opposites, and then they eventually become each other's first loves and first everythings. Ash and Autumn have an on and off relationship throughout all of high school. Ash is actually on the football team and his coach is actually Drew, who is Autumn's father. So finally it is senior year and things at home for Ash get so bad that Drew actually takes him in and gives him a room at their house. Autumn and Ash are not currently together, but they're now roommates. I love the roommate trope, I love the forced proximity, I love the tension and the intensity. So I like that whole part with them forced to live together, but everything else about the whole toxicity of their relationship, they hate each other, but they love each other. They push each other away even though they want each other. That got pretty tiring after a bit, but I mean, it is set in high school, lots of high school angst and drama. So if you love those kinds of stories, those mature YA high school new adult romances, give this one a try. I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I read a historical romance, Would I Lie to the Duke by Eva Lee. I gave this one 3 stars. I haven't been loving the series. I also gave book 1 3 stars, but it's still fairly good. I will say I love the setup and the whole idea of the stories in the series a lot more than they're executed. Here we have a heroine who is part of her family business and she needs investors and she needs money. She pretends to be a lady, Lady Whitfield, so that she can get attention of investors and the attention of our Duke hero. Noel is fascinated by Jessica, by her intelligence, by the fact that she is a businesswoman. They get to know each other more, they start falling for each other, but of course the whole time Jessica is lying to him, lying to Noel, and pretending to be someone else. It's steamy, it's a steamy historical romance, and lies aside, I did think the romance was really sweet, but I felt bad for Noel. I felt bad about the heroine lying to him, and I was just waiting for everything to blow up, and of course things do blow up. Also, another reason why I couldn't really give this one 4 stars, even though it was really close, was the fact that I felt disconnected from the characters. I like Jessica and Noel. I like the whole idea of her being a businesswoman, him being a duke that is very carefree, but I just never fell in love with their characters. Next, I read Magnate by Joanna Shupe, which is another historical romance. I really like this one. I give it 4 stars. The hero Emmett is a rags to riches hero, which I am a total sucker for in historical romances, well, in romances in general. Emmett is a ruthless businessman. He's had to be in order to be where he is today. The heroine Elizabeth comes from old money. She has a wealthy family, but she wants to run her own company. She's a Wall Street and stock market kind of girl, but in order to pursue her passion of running her own company, she needs a business partner. Emmett sees this as his way to get in with Elizabeth's brother, who he wants revenge against. So he's a total bad boy, a rogue, and even though he does do some really dumb decisions, I still loved him and Elizabeth. Like a lot of other Joanna Shupe books, this one is Gilded Age. It's set in New York City. This one is the first book in the Knickerbocker Club series, and I'm just really excited to read more of it. It's got heroes who are wealthy, powerful men. I read another Christina C. Jones book, Strictly Professional. This one is an office romance between 2 lawyers. Terrence and Gabby meet at a bar one night, but it never goes further than that. But then they see each other again, this time at work, and even worse, Gabby is now working under Terrence. He is to be her new mentor, and there is a no fraternity immunization policy going on, so nothing can go on between them. This was an okay read for me. It was really fast, really short. I really liked Gabby's character. I loved her independence, her ambition. Terrence, I really didn't care about. The romance is forbidden, so it gets really spicy. It ends on a happy for now-ish note. I realize when I read this author's books, I'm not the biggest fan of her endings because every time I get to them, I'm like, wait, that's it? I always want more because I feel like the endings, the romance always ends too abruptly. But this couple does have a sequel, they have a second book, but honestly I don't think I'm gonna read it because I'm just not that invested enough to read more. I read a Jessa Kane novella because of course, Shirley's coach's daughter. I gave this one 3 stars, it was okay. We've got a sports romance this time with a basketball player hero. Her father is the coach, the hero's coach, so things are forbidden, but our hero is our over-the-top obsessed alpha hero, so he will do anything to have the heroine. Next, I read The Pearl by Tiffany Reisz. I gave this one 3.5 stars, which I am so sad about because I gave the first 2 books in the series, in the Godwick series, 5 stars. Sadly, I didn't love this 3rd book as much as the first 2. I just didn't really fall in love with the whole older dominant woman, younger submissive man type of dynamic. I mean, Tiffany Reisz has written this dynamic before and I loved it before, but here I just never really was into it. Arthur, our hero, our younger hero, is forced to pay his brother's debts. He pays them to Reagan, who is a hotel owner, by being her boy toy. It is a hot read though. It is Tiffany Reisz and she always has some good smut. I just sadly wasn't into our main characters, but I will say all the kinky stuff does make up for that. And then I read Makeup Breakup by Lily Menon. This one is an enemies to lovers romance, kind of a second chance romance too. Annika and Hudson are rival app developers. Annika's app helps people mend their relationships, whereas Hudson's app helps people break up. Annika has some messy feelings for Hudson because even though they had a one-night stand together, she believes that he stole her idea of this dating app. So when he moves into the office next door, she gives him a piece of her mind. I like the idea of this one. I love the fact that our heroine, Annika, is working in tech, but I had a hard time buying this romance. I was not feeling the chemistry between these two. I feel like if we got the hero's point of view, if we got Hudson's point of view in this book along with Annika's, it would have helped a lot. I really just didn't see why these two fell for each other. Hudson is a dick and he is kind of bland. I had high hopes for this one, but I did struggle with it, so I gave it 2.5 stars. And then I read the Made of Steel series by Ivy Smoak, which is 3 books: Made of Steel, Forged in Flames, and Carved in Ice. I gave all 3 books 3 stars, but I will say, even though it wasn't the best series, I had a hard time putting it down. Like, I could not stop reading this series. I just had to know what was going on. It's a nudo college romance and romantic suspense. Growing up, the heroine Summer was best friends with the boy next door, but then her parents die in an accident and everything is torn away from her. She ends up in the system and then ends up in the hands of this awful, evil mafia guy. She stabs him, she sends him to jail, and she is now in the witness protection program. She's attending college under a different name, and of course the boy next door that she used to love is living across the hall from her. It gets a little complicated from there because Miles, the boy next door, is not the only love interest. Besides Miles, there is Eli, who represents a fresh start for Summer. He has nothing to do with her past, though he does have some secrets of his own. And there's also a mysterious vigilante who never shows his face. V, the vigilante, is always there to save Summer whenever she gets in trouble, because it turns out the mafia guy is out of jail and he is hunting her down. So there is a lot of stuff going on in this trilogy. The heroine makes some really stupid decisions that I was just rolling my eyes about. This girl cannot stop putting herself in danger, but I did really like the whole suspenseful aspect of this trilogy, like the paranoia, the fear and anxiety that Summer was feeling because she's being hunted down. That's all really well done, but the whole mystery with V and his identity, it's pretty obvious who V is, so it's not much of a mystery, trilogy. Overall, it's a pretty good trilogy, not the best, but I did like the romantic suspense. I just hated that the heroine made some really stupid decisions. And then I read How to Get Lucky by Lauren Blakely and Joe Arden. I read this one because I interviewed Joe Arden, who is the narrator and the author. I interviewed him on my friend Charles's channel, Books on Stereo. I'll link it down below. It was such a fun interview. But story-wise, I gave this book 3 stars. Like, it's an okay read. Not bad, not the greatest, but it was still an okay read, and I always love Joe Arden's narration. Basically, it's a forbidden romance. Teddy and London have this magical night together, and Teddy wants more, but then he finds out that London is none other than his boss's sister. He feels like he can't pursue a relationship with her, but then she asks him for help with her job, so there's a lot of forced proximity going on. They're around each other a lot, but they can't be with each other, so sparks are flying. It's a really quick and sweet read. If you read Lauren Blakely before, it's pretty much on par with the rest of her books. It was interesting though to read a romance written, well, co-written by a romance narrator. I read Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne, and this one is one of my favorite reads this year. It was so good. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. It was so perfectly charming and adorable and quirky. I really love Sally Thorne's writing. I loved how unique she made this story. It's set in this retirement home. Ruthie, the heroine, works at this retirement home as a manager. Ruthie is shy, she has anxiety, she has no social life and spends her day around 90-year-old people. Teddy, our hero, comes into work for 2 of the 90-year-old residents. He's their new assistant, and all they really do is torture him with ridiculous tasks. Teddy is clueless, but he tries to be the best assistant that he can be, mainly so that he can earn enough to pay for his share of this tattoo shop he wants to own. The romance is just so wholesome and precious. I was swooning like crazy. You can just see how Teddy grows to worship the ground that Ruthie walks on. He just adores her, and I love that for her. So this one was amazing, and I loved it. I then read 2 hockey romances, the first 2 books in the Game Changer series by Reid. Book 1 was Game Changer, which I gave 4 stars to. It was so freaking adorable. Scott is a hockey romance player, and Kip is a barista at this juice place that Scott always goes to. Well, he always goes there because after he had his first drink from Kip, he ended his slump on the ice. Now it's like a good luck charm, and it doesn't hurt that Kip is very attractive. They finally go out together after feeling each other out. They get hot and steamy, but since Scott is not out, they can never go public. Scott and Kip are so much fun together. They were so sweet, but it does get a little bit angsty, and I was hurting for Kip because of how he was forced to hide himself and hide his relationship with Scott because Scott wasn't out. I just really enjoyed our main characters. I loved Kip and Scott. I think this was Rachel Reid's debut book, and it was really great. Book 2 is Heated Rivalry, and the one that I was really excited to get to because people were hyping it up for me when I shared that I was reading book 1. Heated Rivalry is an enemies to lovers romance between 2 closeted hockey players. The story is told over a course of several years, from when Shane and Ilya first meet and the years in between when they have their on and off hookups to present day. I gave this one 4 stars. I did enjoy it, and I liked Shane and Ilya, but my main gripe was the fact that there was just too much back and forth. I just wasn't a fan of the years worth of hookups that Shane and Ilya were doing in secret. Like, all they did was just have sex, and I just wasn't feeling the romance here. They're both from rival teams, and over the course of their hockey careers, they've played up this whole enemies thing. I did like the banter between them, and the steam was great. I mean, they just literally had sex all the time. Everything is kept a secret, and it ends with a happy for now, which I was really disappointed by because after like a decade of not being able to be with each other, they definitely deserve that happy ending. Apparently the author is writing a novella for them, so hopefully we get that happy ending for them there. Next, I read The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon, which I gave 4 stars to. This was great. I really enjoyed it. The author is a YA author, and this is her debut adult romance. I made a whole video reading a couple adult romances from YA authors, so I'll link it down below. Here we have an enemies to lovers romance and a co-worker romance between two public radio show hosts. Shay and Dominic are not the biggest fans of each other, but they are forced to work together on this new show, The X Talk, and pretend to be exes. They have to pretend that they were in a relationship, they broke up, and now they're giving relationship advice to people on the radio. They are forced into the show though, because otherwise they'd be laid off. But I love the unique concept of this one. I've never really read a romance about radio, public radio, so that was a really nice look into that whole world. Dominic and Shay were great. I love their chemistry. Their banter on the air and off the air were fantastic. As they get to know each other better, they get less antagonistic with each other. Also, Shay is slightly older, so that was nice. I had a lot of fun with this one, though I will say I would not call it a rom-com. Like, it is, there are no laugh out loud moments, but it is still really fun. I read another Jessa Kane novella called Breaking the Bully. This one is her groveling bully romance. I gave it 4 stars. It was exactly what I was looking for and what I wanted. It's set in high school and college. The hero is the heroine's bully for all the wrong reasons. After he realizes that he messed up, that's when all the groveling starts. So this one, it was exactly what I was in the mood for, even though I'm always in the mood for groveling romances. I then read Lush Money by Angelina M. Lopez, which is a marriage of convenience with a prince hero. So if you love marriage of convenience and royal romances, you definitely need to read this one. Roxanne, the heroine, is a self-made Latinx billionaire CEO. Mateo, the hero, is a prince of a crumbling country. He needs money and she wants a baby, so these two strike a deal and enter a marriage of convenience. With this deal, they'll sleep together 3 times a month so that Roxanne can get her baby and Mateo can save his country. I love this one. I gave it 5 stars. The steam and chemistry were perfect. There's a lot of hate sex in the beginning, so much angst and heartache. I loved all the drama and I loved her 2 main characters. Roxanne is like an ice queen and she's slowly being melted by Mateo. It was just a fantastic read and it almost even had me crying. There was such a heart-wrenching scene at the end, but it was fantastic and I'm so excited to read the next book in the series, which is a second chance romance. Another 5-star read and a book that I could have easily predicted that I would love is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I love this one so much. It was the perfect friends to lovers romance that I was looking for. Poppy and Alex have been best friends since the beginning of college, and every year, every summer, they go on vacation together. They are total opposites, but they just work so perfectly well together. Poppy is outgoing and quirky, flies by the seat of her pants. Alex is very calming and grounded. They shouldn't work together, but they do, except things were wrecked between them 2 years ago and they haven't spoken to each other since. Now it's summer and Poppy is planning one last vacation together so that she can mend things between them and possibly take things to the next level, because there is a ton of unrequited love between them. This book was just hilarious and heartwarming. I was smiling so much while I was reading it. We get to see their vacations every summer and the depth of their friendship in these chapters, and then we also get to see them so full of longing and heartache, wanting to take the next step and be in love but not willing to risk that friendship. It was such a good friends to lovers romance. I loved it. I love Emily Henry's humor. If you love beach read, you will probably love this one too. And then my romance book club, Ravished by Romance, March pick was Accidentally Engaged by Farrah Heron. This one I gave 3.5 stars to. It was very close to a 4, but I liked the first half of the book a lot more than the second half. It's a foodie romance with a fake engagement. The heroine's parents are trying to set her up with her new neighbor, but she refuses. But then Rena gets this opportunity to join this baking cooking competition, except she needs a fiance to join her. This is when Nadim, the neighbor, comes in to help and pretend to be that fake fiance. I love the banter between Nadim and Rena. They were a lot of fun together. I also really enjoyed Rena's close friends, her group of friends. They were all so entertaining. But the thing that brought this romance down a bit, besides the whole fade to black thing, was that once they start the baking competition, things kind of fizzle out. The baking competition itself got a little bit boring, surprisingly. I expected a lot more from it, and I wasn't feeling the chemistry between Rena and Nadim as much anymore. I did like it overall, but I wish we got a little bit more from it. And then I read The Doctor by Nikki Sloan. This is an age gap forbidden romance between the heroine and her ex-boyfriend's dad. The day that Cassidy breaks up with her longtime boyfriend is also the day that she ends up kissing his dad, Greg. They've both actually felt this chemistry between them, but nothing happened, obviously because she's with his son. But now that she isn't with him anymore, things are fair game. It is still pretty forbidden and taboo because the ex would freak out if he ever found out about this affair, but Greg and Cassidy have a very hard time staying away from each other, and they're so hot together. It was pretty much the exact kind of smutty age gap read that I was in the mood for, so this one was great. I give it 4 stars. I do wish we could have gotten the hero's point of view though. We only get Cassidy's point of view. He's a hot older doctor who is trying to mend his relationship with his son, but also falling in love with his son's ex-girlfriend. I feel like there could have been a lot of good steamy scenes and angst from his point of view too. And then I read Float Plan by Trish. This one is more women's fiction than actually romance, but I did like it. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's kind of a depressing read. The heroine, Anna, has lost her fiance to suicide. A year after his death, Anna decides to go on the sailing trip that they both planned. So she sets sail in the Caribbean, but she doesn't have any sailing experience, so she hires Keon, our hero. The romance is pretty slow burn because Anna is still full of grief. Most of this book is her trying to deal with this grief, learn to live without her fiance. There is a lot of sailing terminology in this one that really took me out of the story though. I could have done with less of that, but I mean, I guess if you're a fan of sailing, you would enjoy it a lot more. What I enjoyed most though were the destinations that they both explore. I really felt like I was transported to the Caribbean, so if you love those traveling kinds of stories, this one would be great. I kind of forgot to include a couple more books in this wrap up, which is why I'm filming here instead of my room, but here are the rest of the books that I read back in March. One of them is Awkward by Avery Flynn. This is book 2 in her hockey romance series, the Ice Knight series. It's got the surprise baby trope. I gave this one 3 stars. It was cute, but nothing amazing. It's got the main characters who meet at a wedding rehearsal. They hit it off at this little trivia night where the heroine answers everything correctly. She's the kind of heroine who knows all these random facts and always spouts them out, but they hit it off and they have a one-night stand, and of course it ends up with a baby. Both of them are terrified naturally, Cole especially because he's a hockey player and having a baby will just upend everything, but they do try to get along for the sake of being future co-parents. The romance is okay. It's pretty cute at times. They're both big dorks. There is a whole misunderstanding thing that did get annoying, but overall it was just an okay read, nothing too special. I ended up reading another Meghan Quinn book, totally forgot about this one, but I read The Trade, which is part of her Brentwood Boys series, her baseball romance series. I have been reading the series completely out of order and pretty much in the order that my library acquires them, but they all can be read as a standalone. This one we have a romance between our baseball player hero and a heroine who apparently is married. I gave it 3 stars. It's entertaining and fun like most of Meghan Quinn's books, but I also tend to kind of forget them as soon as I finish reading them. But still, if you're in the mood for something lighthearted, sports romance with a good guy, this one would be great to read. Corey is our baseball player hero and he meets the woman of his dreams one night. Natalie is also one of his teammates' sisters. They hit it off really quickly that night. They have a nice conversation, and when Corey goes home, he is ready. He's like ready to have the 2 kids, so I pick a fence with her, but then it turns out he finds out that Natalie is married. That's what he thinks, but actually Natalie has just recently gotten divorced. Natalie is dealing with a lot of insecurities because of her divorce, so things between her and Corey go at a very, very slow pace. They become friends, get to know each other first. Corey is a really sweet guy. He is very patient with Natalie, but I do feel like this book was a little bit too long, like longer than it needed to be. For some reason with Meghan Quinn, she loves to make her characters take a break or break up for a very, very long time. But other than that, I did like it. It's not my favorite of the series, but it's not bad. And then I read a new to me author, Fearless Love by Danya Marie. This one I discovered because of my library. I check every week to see what new audiobooks, what new romance audiobooks that my library gets. This one showed up along with the rest of the series, and since the cover was gorgeous, I had to get it. Sadly though, I did not like this one. I give it 2 stars. It was just not for me. I could not get into all the the ridiculous drama that was in this book. It did start off strong though. It is a celebrity romance between a rapper hero and an up-and-coming actress heroine. So there's a lot of glamour with that. There's a lot of celebrity name dropping. It's friends to lovers, which I do love usually, but Sean and Chelsea really didn't do much besides sleep with each other. And then there's a lot of drama with their exes, and the story just evolved into something completely different than this like Hollywood romance that it started off as. The story went all over the place and I really just didn't have a fun time with it, so this one was not for me. I finally read To Have and To Hoax by Martha Waters. This is a historical romance between a married couple. It's like a rom-com-ish, lighthearted historical romance. It is lovers to enemies to lovers, and I have not seen the best reviews for this book, but it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I did give it 3 stars. It wasn't amazing either, so it was a fairly okay read for me. Violet and James have been married for 5 years, but a year into their marriage, their very happy marriage, they got into this humongous argument and they haven't really spoken to each other since. But in present day, Violet gets a letter that her husband has been in an accident and is practically on the verge of death. She does rush to him because he is still her husband and she does still have feelings for him, even though they have been buried deep down. When she sees him though, she sees that he is perfectly healthy and not about to die. She's mad that she was tricked, even though it wasn't really his fault, it was more his friends and servants' fault. But she's mad and she wants James to feel that panic that she felt when she found out that James was about to die. She schemes up this whole revenge thing for James that doesn't really go anywhere, but it does bring them back together. There is some fun banter. Violet and James can't stop picking on each other, but it is a pretty slow-paced book. I wanted both of them to talk it out and finally get over what happened 4 years ago, and honestly the whole miscommunication thing was so dumb. But I did like the writing. It wasn't bad for a debut. I love the secondary characters who are about to get their romance in the second book, and I'm hoping I'll love that one more than this book. Next I read That Guy by Kim Jones, mainly because yes, the whole plagiarism scandal thing. Literally the day after the plagiarism came out, my library got a bunch of copies of That Guy in both ebook and audiobook, so props to the people who recommended it to my library because I did not. I completely forgot to. But this one was just an okay read. I give it 3 stars. It's like your fairly typical rich guy, poor girl kind of romance. It is pretty funny. It's a rom-com, which you wouldn't really expect given this cover. Penelope, the heroine, finds herself in a bunch of ridiculous shenanigans all the time in this book. I mean, the way that she meets Jake, the hero, is that she gets caught in his apartment without his permission. So it is totally understandable that Jake does not like Penelope. He's a huge dick to her, but they do fall into bed pretty quickly from there, and it kind of got boring from there too. The book is almost satire. Kim Jones, the author, does play around a lot with the tropes that are very common in romance books. She pokes fun of them, and sometimes it was good and sometimes it was just very awkward and cringy. If you love your rom-coms that are over the top and ridiculous, you'll probably enjoy this one. The heroine and her monologues were just a little bit too much for me sometimes, so I struggled a bit with this and can't really give it more than 3 stars. Also, at the end of That Guy, there was a hint of the secondary characters getting their own book, but Kim Jones hasn't released anything since That Guy, which came out in 2018, so who knows if that book about the secondary characters is ever gonna come out, which does suck because I really wanted to read about them. I also forgot that I read the 3rd book in the Game Changer series by Rachel Reid, the 3rd book in her hockey romance series. Tough Guy is another romance, and I sadly give it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. So far, it's my least favorite of the series. I mean, the fact that I forgot that I read it is pretty telling. It just sadly wasn't as engaging and entertaining as the first 2 books were. Ryan is our hockey player. He's an enforcer and he gets into a lot of fights, but he's lately realized that he's not really into hockey as much anymore. Fabian, the other hero, is a musician. They've actually both known each other for a while. They've known each other since like their teen years, when he was taken in by Fabian's family, who would house hockey players a lot. And growing up around this, Fabian hates hockey and would never want to date a hockey player. But then he runs into Ryan again, who is this giant enforcer but a total cinnamon roll inside. I really liked Ryan, who is a total sweetheart and teddy bear. Fabian I was just okay about. I did like the whole idea of them getting a sort of second chance, because they did actually have some feelings for each other back then, but never really said anything or did anything about it. But they do fall for each other about a decade later. It is really sweet, but just not as good as the first two books. And the last book that I read back in March was The Dawn Project by Solace Ains and Heloise Below. It's a BDSM erotic romance. I don't really read BDSM anymore. It's not my thing anymore, but I was intrigued by this, by the whole friends to lovers part, and it was short, so I gave it a try. I like this one. I give it 3.5 stars. It was very, very close to a 4, but I did want a little bit more romance from it. The friendship part though, I really loved. Robin and John have known each other since college. They've always been platonic friends, but then they see each other at a club, at a sex club, and they find out that they're both into the same kink. Robin, the heroine, tells John that she has been looking for a dom, like a long-term dom, but she doesn't really know what that entails, and John, being such a good friend, he offers to be Robin's dom for a month. It's not really too heavy or intense with the dom sub part, but it does get a bit kinky. I love the friendship, and I did like the way that it turned from friendship to romance, but I do wish that we got more of the romance and lovey-dovey parts. It's pretty lighthearted and sweet, which I don't usually attribute to erotic romances or BDSM romances, but I did like the characters and I like the writing. There are 2 more books in the series, and I'll probably end up reading them. Those were all the books that I read in March. I read almost 50 books. I really don't know what got into me that month, but I just went crazy with reading. Let me know your thoughts if you have read any of these books. I'll link all of them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!